Act. The night my husband stood up at our dinner table and announced that his mother was moving into the back bedroom of my house, everyone expected me to cry, scream, or fold. His sister Paige was already asking for her door code back. Act. His mother Denise had brought a box of china like she had already claimed my kitchen, and Caleb smiled like the decision had been made without me. I am Hannah Whitaker, 35, a nurse practitioner in Asheville, and I had spent years staying calm in rooms where people panicked. So I stayed calm that night too. I reached under my chair, touched the gray folder beside my foot, and let him finish lying. Because inside that folder was the deed with my maiden name on it, the gift letter my parents had signed before my wedding. And the money trail proving $28,600 had been moved through Caleb's fake company into his mother's account. Chapter 1. The house with my maiden naming Caleb stood at the head of my dining table like he was announcing a toast. The pot roast was still warm. The mashed potatoes had gone a little stiff around the edges. Green beans sat untouched in a white serving bowl my mother had given me the first Christmas after we moved in. From the outside, it probably looked like a normal family dinner in a quiet Hendersonville house. Warm kitchen lights. A maple tree dark against the front window, apple pie cooling on the counter, parents, in-laws, husband, wife, but I could feel the room tightening before Caleb even finished his sentence. Mom will take the back bedroom, he said. Paige can still come by whenever she needs to. It's time this house starts feeling like a real family home. His mother, Denise Morrison, sat beside him with her hands folded in her lap, smiling like someone had just handed her a set of keys before the owner had agreed to open the door. His sister Paige leaned back in her chair and gave a little laugh. So do I get my own code again, or? My father did not move. Frank Whitaker sat to my left with one hand around his water glass, quiet in the way he got when he was measuring every word before it left his mouth. My mother, Linda, kept her eyes on her napkin. Her cheeks were pink, but she did not interrupt. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not throw the serving spoon across the kitchen, even though for 1 second I understood why people did dramatic things in movies. Instead, I reached under my chair and touched the gray folder I had placed there before dinner, the corner of it pressed against my ankle. Inside were papers Caleb did not know I had printed. Papers Denise did not know existed. Papers Paige had joked about without understanding that jokes become evidence when the right person is listening. Then I looked at my husband and said, "Before anyone gets a key, I think we should talk about whose house this actually is." 6 months earlier, I still believed the problem was boundaries. I was 35 then, a nurse practitioner at Mission Hospital in Asheville, and I worked mostly nights. I was used to fluorescent hallways at 3 in the morning, patients crashing without warning, families crying into their sleeves because they had no idea what question to ask next. At work, people called me steady, calm, the one who could handle pressure. At home, Caleb called that same calm cold, sometimes rigid, sometimes controlling. I did not think of myself that way. I thought of myself as responsible. Someone had to remember the bills, the insurance renewal, the property tax, the oil change, the groceries, the meal prep, the dental appointments, the birthday gifts for Caleb's mother. For years, I believed being strong meant holding everything together so no one else had to. It took me too long to understand that some people do not help because they know you will carry the weight for them. Caleb Morrison was easy to love at first. That is the part I need you to understand. He was not a cartoon villain when I married him. He remembered my coffee order. He knew the song I played on repeat when I was in nursing school. He called my parents Frank and Linda with such natural warmth that my mother once told me he made himself feel like family before he technically was. He worked as a regional account manager for a building materials company. He could talk to anyone, contractors, receptionists, church ladies, my father, the cashier at Ingalls. He had that kind of charm that made people relax around him before they realized they had handed him more trust than he had earned. The first year of our marriage felt normal enough. Then, slowly, I noticed every decision had a third voice in it. We looked at sofas and Caleb said, "Let me ask Mom what she thinks." We planned a weekend in Charleston and he said Mom wanted us that weekend. I wanted to paint the living room a soft gray, and he said Mom says gray feels depressing. One night, I asked him gently, "Do you think your mom has a lot of influence on our decisions?" He looked at me like I had insulted something sacred. "She's my mother, Hannah. That was always where the conversation ended. Not because it solved anything, but because Caleb treated those 3 words like a locked door. The house made it worse. It was not a mansion. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a small kitchen with old cabinets that I meant to refinish someday. A back patio where I drank coffee after night shifts and listened to birds before the rest of the neighborhood woke up. A maple tree in the front yard that turned bright red every October, but to me, it was the first place I had ever lived where I did not feel temporary, no landlord, no rent increase, no fear that one bad month would mean boxes in the hallway. No one else's name deciding whether I could stay. My parents bought it for me 2 weeks before my wedding. They were not rich. Frank Whitaker had been an electrician for 38 years. He crawled through attics in July heat, climbed ladders in winter, and took weekend emergency calls when other men wanted to rest. My mother worked in the bakery section at Costco for 19 years, starting before sunrise, coming home with flour in her hair and sugar on her sleeves. They saved for 24 years. They paid $318,000 in cash. No mortgage, no Caleb. No Morrison family contribution. Just Frank and Linda Whitaker sitting at a closing table, sliding their life's discipline across to a daughter they wanted to protect. The deed said Hannah Elise Whitaker, not Hannah Morrison, not Caleb Morrison. Lydecker, my maiden name. Along with the deed was a notarized gift letter that said the property was gifted solely to Hannah Elise Whitaker as her sole and separate property. I remembered my father handing me that folder in the parking lot after closing. He looked uncomfortable, like the words mattered too much for him to dress them up. "This is yours, Hannah," he said, "not because I don't trust marriage. Because I know what happens when women are told love means signing away safety." I laughed softly then because I was young enough to think caution was the same thing as fear. "Dad, Caleb isn't like that." He kissed my forehead. "Then you'll never need it." I put the deed and gift letter in a fireproof lockbox on the top shelf of my bedroom closet. For years, I barely thought about them. They became old paperwork, the kind of thing you keep because parents tell you to and responsible daughters listen. I did not know that folder would save me. Denise started coming over more after our second anniversary. At first, it was Sunday dinner. She brought banana bread wrapped in foil and called me honey in a voice soft enough to make correction feel rude. Then Sunday became the whole afternoon. Then Saturday, too. Then Friday through Sunday, with Caleb telling me instead of asking, "Mom's coming Friday." The first few times I let it go. Denise had lost her own home after a divorce more than 20 years before. I knew the story. Raymond left. Denise packed Caleb and Paige into an old sedan. They stayed with relatives, then in apartments that never felt permanent. Caleb had told me once that as a boy he used to ask when they were going home, and Denise would cry after she thought he was asleep. I felt sorry for her, a part of me still does. But sympathy can become a door if the wrong person keeps pushing. Denise would stand in my kitchen and wash dishes I had not asked her to wash. She would move mugs to a different cabinet because it made more sense this way. She would throw blankets and place them where she preferred them. Small things. Things that sounded petty if I said them out loud. Then, after her third weekend in a row, I told Caleb I needed warning before anyone stayed overnight. He frowned like I had changed a rule he had never agreed to. "She's my mother. She doesn't need an invitation." I was standing at the sink, rinsing lettuce for dinner. I remember turning off the water before answering, because I wanted my voice to stay even. "In this house, everyone needs an invitation." He did not respond. He just stared at me. Then walked into the living room where Denise sat watching the evening news like a guest who had begun auditioning for ownership. The first time Denise told me what she really believed, Caleb had gone to pick up takeout. She and I were alone in the kitchen. She dried her hands on a dish towel and looked around the room slowly, not admiring it, assessing it, the cabinets, the back hallway, the guest room door, the little breakfast nook by the window. Then she said, "When a woman marries, her home becomes part of her husband's family." I stood very still. Maybe another woman would have laughed it off. Maybe another woman would have told herself Denise was old-fashioned or lonely or wounded. Maybe I had told myself all of those things for too long already. I said, "That's not how deeds work." Denise smiled. "Paperwork is one thing, family is another." At the time, I did not understand that she was not giving an opinion. She was making a declaration. She did not see my house as the place I lived, or the place my parents had bought with 24 years of sacrifice, or the place where my name sat quietly on county records in black ink. She saw it as something the Morrison family had a right to enter, one weekend at a time, one room at a time, one key at a time. Chapter 2. The first key was not the last. The first thing Denise changed was not a lock or a room or a bank account. It was a curtain. I remember that because it felt so small at the time, almost too small to be angry about, which was exactly why it bothered me. I came home from a night shift with my hair still pulled into a tired bun and the smell of hospital sanitizer caught in the fabric of my scrubs. All I wanted was a shower, a cold glass of water, and maybe 4 hours of sleep before my phone started buzzing again. But when I stepped into the living room, I stopped. The navy curtains were gone. The ones my mother and I had picked together, the ones that made the room feel calm in the morning, had been replaced with cream lace panels that looked like they belonged in a church basement. They were thin and fussy and too delicate for the room, hanging from the rod like they had been waiting for permission to judge me. Denise stood near the window with both hands clasped in front of her, smiling like she had just solved a problem I had been too blind to notice. "I bought them with my own money," she said. "Consider it a gift." I looked at the curtains, then at her. "Denise, you can't change things in my house without asking me." Her smile tightened just enough for me to see what was underneath it. I was helping. That was always the word. Helping. As if help stopped being invasive, the moment someone used a soft voice. Caleb came home that evening and acted like I had complained about a glass of water being too cold. "Mom was just trying to make the place warmer," he said, dropping his keys into the little ceramic bowl by the door. "Why do you make everything about control?" I was standing in the kitchen, cutting vegetables I no longer wanted to eat. "I'm not making it about control. I'm making it about permission." He sighed like I was exhausting him on purpose. "They're curtains, Hannah." "No," I said, setting the knife down carefully. "They're a test." He stared at me for a second, then shook his head and walked away. A week later, the guest room changed. I had just finished a 14-hour shift. One of those nights where everything goes wrong in waves, where a patient crashes at 2 in the morning, a family member collapses in the hallway, and the vending machine coffee tastes like burnt metal but you drink it anyway because sitting down feels dangerous. When I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked past the guest room on my way to the bathroom and stopped again. The door was open. The bedding was different. A floral duvet covered the bed, pink and green and completely unfamiliar. A small lamp sat on the nightstand. Beside it were Denise's reading glasses, a bottle of melatonin, and a framed photo of Caleb with his arm around her shoulders. In the closet, one of her cardigans hung neatly beside a row of empty hangers, as if the room had been waiting for more. I stood there for a long time, still wearing my hospital badge. Then I found Caleb in the kitchen, eating cereal over the sink. "What happened to the guest room?" He did not look up. "Mom's been staying more, so I made it comfortable. You redecorated a room in my house without asking me." He set the bowl down. "Our house, Hannah the deed says Hannah Elise Whitaker. Not Morrison, not ours, not yours." His face changed, not guilt, not shame, something harder. "You sound like a landlord, not a wife." "And you sound like a husband who forgot whose name is on the title." He left after that, not dramatically. He just picked up his jacket and walked out through the garage door, closing it softly behind him. That was worse than slamming it. An angry Caleb was loud. A quiet Caleb was planning. Paige started coming by more after that. At first, it was little things. She would text Caleb and show up 20 minutes later, never asking me. She would stretch out on my sofa and scroll through TikTok with the volume, just loud enough to make the house feel less like mine. She ate the leftovers I had packed for work. She used towels from the hallway closet and left them damp on the bathroom floor. Once I found 3 packages addressed to Paige Morrison stacked beside my front door. When I asked her about it, she shrugged. "Mom's apartment has weird delivery." I wanted to ask what that had to do with my address, but I was tired of being the only person in that family who believed questions needed answers. The worst moment came on a Thursday afternoon, when I got home early after a shift got cut short. I walked down the hallway and saw the door to my home office open. Paige was inside. She was sitting in my chair, feet propped on the edge of my desk, phone in one hand, one of my pens in the other. My laptop had been moved to the side. A stack of patient reference books had been pushed against the wall. She looked up like I had interrupted her in a public library. "Oh hey, I just needed a quiet spot. Caleb said I could use any room." I called him right there, standing in the doorway. Act. "Did you tell Paige she could use any room in my house?" There was a pause, a small one, but I heard it. "It's our house. Stop acting like it's just yours." I ended the call before I said something I could not take back, then I looked at Paige. Act. "This room is off limits." She blinked. Okay, geez, that night I drove to the hardware store and bought a keyed lock. I installed it myself with a screwdriver, a YouTube video, and the kind of calm that only shows up when anger has nowhere safe to go. Act. I kept both keys in my drawer. Caleb noticed the lock before dinner. "You're turning this house into a fortress. Then stop letting people walk through it like a lobby." For a few days he said nothing about it. Denise did not mention the curtains. Act. Paige did not come by. The silence almost felt like progress. Then I found the locksmith receipt. It was folded in Caleb's jacket pocket, with a gas station receipt and a mint wrapper. I was not snooping. I was doing laundry. Act. The same laundry I always did because apparently even resentment needed clean socks. 4 house key copies. Paid by Caleb Morrison. When he came home, I held the receipt up. "What is this?" He glanced at it and shrugged. Act. Like I had found proof he bought milk. "I gave Mom a key. She shouldn't have to wait on a porch like a stranger." "You gave your mother a key to a house you do not own." His jaw tightened. "Stop saying that. Stop making me need to." Act. He walked past me and went upstairs. I stood in the laundry room with the receipt in my hand and felt something inside me settle into place. Not panic, not even rage. Clarity. The next morning, I called a locksmith. By 4 that afternoon, every exterior lock had been rekeyed. Front door, back door, garage entry. I paid for it from my personal account. The locksmith handed me 2 new keys, and I held them in my palm like they weighed more than metal. One went on my keychain. Act. The other went into the fireproof lockbox beside the deed and gift letter. For the first time in weeks, the house was quiet in a way that felt earned. That feeling lasted less than 24 hours. The next day, Denise came over. Act. I heard the key scrape in the front door before I saw her. Once, twice, then the sharp rattle of the knob. I stood in the hallway and listened. Outside, Denise tried again. A neighbor across the street was watering her hydrangeas. Act. I could see her through the front window, pretending not to watch. Denise called Caleb. A minute later, his phone rang in the living room. He answered, listened, then turned toward me. "Did you change the locks?" "Yes." His eyes narrowed. "Hannah." Act. If she needs to come over, she can knock like a guest. He left to pick her up or comfort her or whatever sons like Caleb do when their mothers discover the world has boundaries. That evening, Denise posted in her church Facebook group, Act. Some women forget that family should never be made to stand outside like strangers. A house is only a home when the door is open. She did not use my name. She did not have to. The next morning, my neighbor Mrs. Albright stopped me by the mailbox. Act. "Everything okay with Caleb's mom? She seemed pretty upset yesterday." I smiled the way women smile when they are trying not to hand strangers a full court transcript on the sidewalk. "It's a private family matter." Inside, Act. I closed the door and leaned against it. That was when I understood Denise had 2 methods. If she could not get in through the front door, she would get in through sympathy. Caleb came home already angry. Act. "You humiliated my mother in front of the neighborhood. She tried to enter a house without permission. She's 65, Hannah. She's 65, not homeless. And I am not cruel for asking someone to knock." His voice softened then. Act. Which was always more dangerous than when it rose. "She lost her home once. You know what that did to her." I did know. At least I knew the version he had told me. Raymond leaving. Denise packing 2 children into an old sedan. Act. Caleb asking if they were ever going home. I had felt sorry for her. A part of me still did, so my voice softened too. "I'm sorry she lost her home, but mine is not the replacement." He looked at me like I had failed a test. 2 weeks later, he came home carrying a small white box. "A smart lock," he said, setting it on the kitchen table. "No more physical keys. The app tracks everything. You'll see every unlock." It sounded reasonable. That was what made it dangerous. I stared at the box. Act. "I'm the primary admin. No one gets access unless I approve it." "Of course," he said too quickly, but I was exhausted. I was working extra nights. I was tired of being the villain in a story everyone else kept editing. Act. And part of me still wanted to believe my marriage could be repaired with rules, logs, and technology. He installed it that weekend. I set up the app myself. Hannah Whitaker Morrison, primary admin. Caleb Morrison, secondary admin, 2 users. I checked 3 times, no Denise. No Paige. For a little while I let myself breathe. That night, the blue glow of the app lit up my face in the dark bedroom, while Caleb slept turned away from me. I looked at those 2 names and told myself this was better. Cleaner, trackable, safer. I didn't fully trust Caleb anymore, but I still trusted the system. That was my mistake. Chapter 3. When the door opened without me, by the time I learned what that system allowed, it was already too late to pretend the lock had made me safer. For a while, nothing obvious happened. The app showed my name and Caleb's name. The door clicked when I left for work and clicked when I came home. I checked the history sometimes, mostly out of habit, and every entry looked ordinary enough that I started to feel foolish for being suspicious of a screen that kept telling me everything was normal. Then Mission Hospital lost one of our nurse practitioners to maternity leave earlier than expected, and my schedule changed overnight. 3 night shifts became 4, 4 became 5. I started sleeping in 20-minute pieces in my car before driving home, on the couch with one shoe still on, in the break room with my phone alarm pressed against my chest. I ate protein bars for dinner and called them meals. I knew which vending machine still had bottled water at 3 in the morning. I knew how to tell a family that their father might not make it through the night without letting my voice crack. At work, people came to me when they were scared. At home, I was too tired to notice what fear looked like when it wore my husband's face. The first sign was coffee. I came home just after 8 on a Wednesday morning, my scrubs wrinkled, my feet aching, my mind still replaying a code blue from 2 hours earlier. The house should have been empty. Caleb was at work. Denise did not have a key anymore. Paige had not been over since I locked my office, but the moment I stepped inside I smelled fresh coffee, not the dark roast I used, something sweeter, with vanilla creamer. I stood in the entryway and listened. The living room was a mess. A plate with crumbs sat on the armrest of my sofa. A throw blanket was balled up on the floor. There was a package in the hallway addressed to Paige Morrison. My stomach tightened. I walked into the kitchen and found my meal prep containers open in the fridge. 2 were empty. One had a fork stuck inside it, like whoever ate from it had planned to come back and finish later. Then I saw Paige asleep on the couch. She was curled under my blanket, her phone resting on her chest, one bare foot hanging over the cushion like she had lived there for years. For a moment I did not move. I just stood there, exhausted and cold and strangely calm. Then I walked to my home office. The door was still locked, but my laptop was sitting on the coffee table. I stared at it like it was an animal that had crawled there on its own. The laptop I kept in my locked office. The laptop with work files, tax documents, insurance information, and scanned copies of household records. My hands started to shake. I opened the Smart Lock app. The history loaded slowly, one line at a time. Paige Morrison unlocked front door, 11:42 a.m. Paige Morrison unlocked front door, 6:08 p.m. Paige Morrison unlocked front door, 2:13 p.m. I had never added Paige, I had never approved Paige, I had never even been asked. I walked back into the living room and said her name. She startled awake and blinked at me like I was the one who had entered without permission. "What's happening?" she mumbled. "You're in my house without my permission. That's what is happening." She sat up, rubbing one eye. Caleb said it was fine. Caleb doesn't own this house. She looked around, annoyed now, not embarrassed. "You're really kicking me out over coffee and a couch?" "No. I'm asking you to leave because you entered my home without my permission." Paige grabbed her phone and started typing so fast, her thumbs looked angry. I could see Caleb's name at the top of the screen. She muttered something about me acting like a prison guard, then gathered her shoes, her purse, and the package from the hallway. At the door, she turned back. "You know, this is why Mom says you don't know how to be family." I was so tired that the words did not even hurt right away. They just landed somewhere deep and waited. When the door shut behind her, I called Caleb. He answered on the 3rd ring. "What's wrong? How does Paige have access to the smart lock?" Silence, not confusion, not surprised silence. "She needed somewhere quiet," he said finally. "You added her without telling me. You weren't home. That makes it worse, Caleb. You waited until I wasn't home." His voice hardened. "She's family. Family is not a master key." I opened the app while he was still on the phone. I removed Paige. Then I removed Caleb as secondary admin and changed him to a standard user. His tone changed instantly. What did you just do? I corrected the problem. You removed me as admin? Yes. You enjoy having power, don't you? No. I enjoy knowing who can open my front door. He hung up that night. He slept in the guest room. Not our bedroom. The guest room that still had Denise's floral duvet, Denise's reading glasses, Denise's little bottle of melatonin on the nightstand. He did not yell. He did not argue over dinner. He did not ask about my shift. He went quiet. And quiet Caleb had always been worse. For the next few weeks, he moved around the house like a man documenting grievances. If I asked whether he wanted dinner, he said he already ate. If I asked about a bill, he said he would look later. If Denise called, he left the room. If Paige texted, he turned his phone face down. I told myself peace was still peace, even if it felt like a warning. Then I opened the joint checking account. I did it on a Sunday morning because the electric bill seemed higher than usual, and I wanted to make sure the autopay had cleared. That was when I noticed the balance was lower than it should have been. Much lower. I scrolled backward. Caleb's auto transfer had stopped 3 months earlier. I checked again, thinking I had missed it. I had not. His share of the household bills had not come in for 92 days. Total missing, $6,300. When he came in from the garage, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the laptop open. Where is your part of the bills? He glanced at the screen. What money? Your share, 3 months. Nothing. He opened the fridge like we were discussing weather. I've been helping Mom. How much help? A few things here and there. I turned the laptop toward him. $6,300 is not here and there. He shut the fridge harder than necessary. You have a paid-off house, Hannah. You don't understand real pressure. That sentence hit harder than the missing money, because he did not see my parents' sacrifice. He did not see Frank crawling through attics for overtime or Linda standing on her feet in a bakery before sunrise. He saw a paid-off house and decided it meant I owed everyone else comfort. I waited until he left for work the next morning. Then I made coffee I never drank and opened 7 months of bank statements. I was not looking for one mistake anymore. I was looking for a pattern. I found it under a name I had never heard before, Blue Ridge Home and Hearth LLC. $3,100 for crawl space insulation, $4,700 for bathroom plumbing, $5,200 for cabinet refinishing, $2,900 for smart home installation. $6,400 for roof repair, smaller charges in between, total $28,600. I walked through my own house with the statements in my hand. The crawl space had not been touched. The bathroom plumbing was the same line my father had fixed himself on a Sunday afternoon with a wrench and a bad knee. The cabinet still had the same scratch near the sink from when Caleb dropped a cast iron pan. The roof had no new shingles. The smart lock had come from a box Caleb bought and installed himself. No contractor had been in my house. No work had been done. I searched Blue Ridge Home and Hearth LLC. No website. No reviews. No office address. No phone listing that led anywhere useful. Then I found the business registry, registered agent Caleb R. Morrison. Filing date, 8 months earlier. I sat very still. 8 months earlier was when Denise had started talking more about getting older. About stability, about not wanting to die in an apartment, about how some women got houses and some women got left with nothing. The room seemed to shrink around me. This was no longer about curtains, or a guest room, or a key. Caleb had not just opened my door to his mother and sister. He had opened our bank account too. That afternoon I was supposed to be asleep before another night shift, but I could not close my eyes. I was standing in the hallway, trying to decide whether to confront him, when I heard Paige's voice near the guest room. She must have thought I was asleep. Mom said once she's in the house, Hannah will stop acting like she owns the place. A pause, then Paige laughed softly. Caleb already handled the money part. I did not step out, I did not shout. I did not give her the satisfaction of seeing my face. I just opened the notes app on my phone and wrote down the time, the words, and where I was standing when I heard them. Because by then, I understood something I should have understood sooner. If I confronted Caleb with anger, he would call me paranoid. If I confronted him with fear, he would call me unstable. If I confronted him with questions, he would lie. so I needed something he could not charm his way around. That night, after he went to sleep in the room he had started calling Mom's room, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I typed with fingers that felt strangely steady. Act. Divorce attorney, Asheville marital asset dissipation separate property. Can spouse move mother into separate property home? North Carolina gift letter separate property divorce. One name kept appearing in the results, Mara Chen. Act. I stared at her website for a long time before I clicked the contact form. Then I looked down the hallway toward the closet where the fireproof lockbox sat on the top shelf. Holding the deed and gift letter I had once thought were just old paperwork. Act. For the first time, I did not think of them as documents. I thought of them as a way out. Chapter 4. The longest 3 weeks of my Maria Jamara Chen's office sat on the second floor of a brick building in downtown Asheville. Act. Above a small accounting firm and across the street from a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon every time the door opened. I remember noticing that, because I was trying not to notice my own hands. Act. They were wrapped around the strap of my purse so tightly my knuckles had gone pale. Inside that purse were printed bank statements, screenshots from the Smart Lock app, the business registry page for Blue Ridge Home and Hearth LLC, Act, and the deed my father had told me to keep safe years before I understood why Mara did not look like the kind of attorney people imagined in revenge stories. She was not dramatic. She did not slam folders on desks or say clever things for effect. Act. She wore a charcoal blazer, kept her hair clipped at the back of her neck, and listened so quietly that I had to fight the urge to fill every silence. I laid everything on her desk, the deed with Hannah Whitaker on it, the notarized gift letter, Act, the smart lock logs with Paige's name, the 7 months of joint checking statements, the invoices from a company that had never touched my house, the business filing with Caleb R. Morrison, listed as registered agent. Mara read for a long time. Act. She made notes with a blue pen. Not read. I noticed that too, because my mind was latching onto anything that did not feel like betrayal. Finally, she looked up. The house is separate property based on what you're showing me. Act. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. Then she tapped the bank statements. The bigger problem is what he did with marital funds. What is that called? Dissipation of marital assets. The phrase sounded cold, legal, almost sterile. Act. It did not sound like my husband stealing comfort from one woman to buy stability for another. It did not sound like eating dinner across from a man who could ask me how my shift was while moving money through a fake company. Act. But maybe that was why law had words like that, because emotions made betrayal too slippery to hold. I asked the question I had been afraid to ask. Can I confront him? Mara's answer came immediately. No, I stared at her. No, do not tip your hand. Act. Do not accuse him at home. Do not change financial access yet unless I tell you. We need a clean trace. He's living in my house. I know. He's moving money behind my back. I know. And I'm supposed to just go home and act normal? Act. Mara's expression softened, but only slightly. You're supposed to go home and stay safe. Evidence first. Anger later. I hated how much sense that made. Before I left, Mara gave me the name of a forensic accountant named Priya Nair. Act. She said Priya handled divorce cases where money had been moved through small businesses, family accounts, and fake invoices. I almost laughed when she said it. Act. Because 6 months earlier I would have thought that sounded like something that happened to rich people or criminals on television, not to a nurse practitioner in Hendersonville, whose biggest problem used to be a mother-in-law changing curtains. Act. Priya called me the next afternoon. Her voice was direct, calm, and efficient. I'll need the full bank statements, not just screenshots, LLC filing if you have it, any invoice descriptions. Act. Any credit card information you can legally access through joint finances, and a timeline of access issues in the house. I asked her if the trail might be hard to follow. She paused just long enough to make me feel foolish. Act. If it's as sloppy as it looks, no. People think fraud is hidden because nobody has looked yet. After that, I began the longest 3 weeks of my marriage. I went home with a new rule burning in my chest. Do not tip your hand, so I cooked dinner. Act. I folded laundry. I went to work. I came home and passed the guest room where Denise's floral duvet still sat on the bed, where her cardigan still hung in the closet like a flag planted in enemy territory. Act. Caleb moved around me with the strange tenderness of a man trying to look innocent for an audience that was not there. You seem tired, he said one night. I worked 14 hours. You always work, and yet the bills still need paying. Act. His eyes flicked toward me, quick and sharp, then away. Denise called twice that week. I let it go to voicemail the first time. The second time, I answered because Caleb was watching. Hannah, honey, she said, her voice syrupy and wounded. Act. I just want us to feel like family again. I looked at the lace curtains she had hung in my living room. I want respect before I want closeness. She sighed. That sounds lonely. No, I said, it sounds honest. Paige texted me once. Act. Are you still mad about the lock thing? I did not answer. Instead, I screenshotted it and sent it to Mara. I did not tell Frank and Linda everything at first. Act. I could not bear the thought of my father. Finding out the house he had crawled through attics to buy for me had become a target. Act. I could not bear my mother realizing that the gift she had wrapped in sacrifice had been treated like spare square footage for another family's guilt. But mothers hear things people do not say. Act. Linda called me after one of my night shifts and listened to me talk about nothing for 3 minutes. Then she said, "Is he making you feel like a guest in your own house?" I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage, still wearing my badge, and closed my eyes. I did not answer. She did not push. You don't have to protect us from the truth, honey. Later that night, Frank texted me, "Your name is on that deed for a reason, kiddo." That was when I cried. Not loud, not dramatically. Just one hand over my mouth in my parked car while people in scrubs walked past my windshield and fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The next evening, Caleb placed a document on the kitchen counter. Just sign this. I was loading the dishwasher. I dried my hands slowly. What is it? Tax stuff, contractor warranty stuff. I looked down. Blue Ridge Home and Hearth LLC sat at the top of the page. My heartbeat changed, but my face did not. What contractor warranty? For the work we've been doing around the house. What work? He gave me that tired husband look, the one he used when he wanted me to feel unreasonable. Don't start. Just sign it. I don't sign anything I haven't read. His mouth tightened. You're exhausting to be married to. Then his phone rang. He stepped into the garage to answer it, leaving the document on the counter. I photographed every page, then I sent it to Mara. Her reply came 10 minutes later. Do not sign. Keep original if he leaves it. If not, photos are useful. 2 days later, Priya called. I was standing in the laundry room, folding Caleb's shirts, which felt so absurd I almost laughed. I traced the funds, she said. I sat down on the floor. Tell me. Joint checking to Blue Ridge Home and Hearth LLC. From there, transfers into a savings account at Carolina Mountain Credit Union. Account holder is Denise M. Morrison. The room became very still. How much? $28,600 total. I pressed my palm flat against the tile. And Denise received it? She received the money, repeatedly, Priya continued. There was also a business credit card tied to Blue Ridge Home and Hearth. $7,900. Furniture store, mattress. Storage unit, a recliner delivery connected to Denise's apartment address. By the time she finished, I was no longer cold. If I was clear, Denise had not simply wanted to be included. She had been funded. Caleb had not simply been helping his mother. He had been building a paper trail and hoping I would be too tired, too guilty, or too married to read it. Mara prepared a packet after that, a draft separation filing, a demand for reimbursement, a notice denying occupancy to Denise Morrison and Paige Morrison, a summary of my separate property position, a summary of the marital asset dissipation. She explained everything in a conference call while I sat at my kitchen table and watched Caleb's shadow move under the guest room door upstairs. If he makes a public announcement about your property, Mara said, you can correct the record. Facts only. No threats, no screaming. Let the documents do the work. I almost smiled. That was the first thing anyone had said in weeks that sounded like something I could do. Facts only, no screaming documents. Then Caleb created the room where it would all happen. Saturday dinner, he said one morning, buttoning his shirt in the mirror. Your parents, Mom, Paige. We're ending this tension. What tension? The way you keep making Mom feel unwanted. The way you treat Paige like a criminal. We need everyone at the table. I looked at him through the mirror. Did you already promise her the room? He paused too long, then he smiled. You'll see it differently once everyone talks. No, I would not. But I nodded. On Saturday, I cooked pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, and the kind of dinner that made a house smell safe. Linda brought apple pie. Frank and Linda arrived early, and my father took one look at my face before setting his coat over a chair. Do you want us quiet unless you need us? Yes. Linda hugged me so quickly it almost broke me. 1 hour before everyone else arrived, Priya's final report landed in my inbox. Final trace confirmed. I printed it with hands that did not shake. Deed, gift letter, smart lock logs, LLC filing, the form Caleb wanted me to sign, Priya's summary, Mara's packet. I placed everything into a gray folder and slid it under my chair. Then the doorbell rang. Denise stood on the porch holding a box of china against her chest, smiling like she had already moved in. I thought I'd bring a few things over, she said, since soon I'll be using them here anyway. Chapter 5. The dinner where the keys stopped, where Kingy stepped back and let her in, because for the first time in months, I was not afraid of what she brought into my house. Denise walked straight to the kitchen island and set the box down like it belonged there. She peeled back the cardboard flaps and showed my mother a stack of white china plates with tiny blue flowers around the edge. These will look better in the upper cabinet, she said. The white plates Hannah uses are a little plain. Linda did not answer. She just looked at the china, then at me. Paige came in 10 minutes later with an overnight bag slung over one shoulder. She gave me a smile that never reached her eyes. Just in case dinner runs late, she said. Caleb arrived last, even though he lived there. He came down from the guest room, wearing the navy button-down Denise liked, his hair still damp from the shower, his face arranged into the calm confidence of a man who thought the room had already been won. Dinner was almost normal, which made it worse. Denise talked about how cold her apartment got at night. Paige complained that the salon had cut her hours again. Caleb kept using the word family like he was pressing a thumb into a bruise. Family shows up. Family makes room. Family does not keep score. I passed the mashed potatoes. I poured water. I answered when someone spoke to me. I watched Frank sit so still that only his jaw moved. I watched Linda cut her pot roast into pieces too small to eat. I felt the gray folder under my chair like a second heartbeat. Then Denise leaned back and sighed. When Raymond left, I lost the only home I thought I would ever have. For 1 second, I felt the old sympathy rise. I knew that wound was real. But I also knew a wound did not become a deed, and pain did not become permission. I said, I am sorry that happened to you. Denise softened, thinking she had found the door. Caleb heard it too. After dessert, he stood. He put one hand on the back of Denise's chair and looked around the table like a man about to deliver good news. We have all been walking on eggshells, he said. It stops tonight. Mom is moving into the back bedroom next month. Paige will have guest access when needed. Hannah and I are married, and this house should finally feel like a Morrison family home. Denise lifted a hand to her chest. I do not want to be a burden, she said, in the voice of someone who had packed china. Paige smiled and said, So do I get my own coat again, or should I just text Caleb? Caleb laughed softly. We will set that up. That was the moment the room changed for me. Not because I was shocked, I had already known. But hearing him say it out loud in front of my parents, in the house they had bought for me, removed the last small piece of guilt I had been carrying. I set my water glass down. Then I reached under my chair and took out the gray folder. Caleb's smile faded first. Hannah, do not embarrass yourself. I stood slowly. I am not embarrassed. That is the part you miscalculated. He looked toward my parents, then back at me. This is exactly what I mean. You make everything legal. You made this announcement in front of everyone, I said. So I am going to correct it in front of everyone. I opened the folder and took out the deed. My fingers were steady. The name on this deed is Hannah Elise Whitaker. Caleb gave a sharp little laugh. We are married. That makes it ours. Marriage gave you a home to live in with me. It did not give your mother ownership. Frank spoke then, quiet but solid. Linda and I bought that house, paid in full before the wedding. Linda added, we wanted our daughter safe. Denise's face hardened. So, this is what this is about. Paperwork? No, I said. This is about you treating paperwork like it only matters when it helps you. I placed the notarized gift letter beside the deed. This property was gifted solely to Hannah Elise Whitaker as her sole and separate property. Caleb stared at the paper. You have been holding that over me for years. No, I forgot it was there for years. You reminded me why my father made me keep it. Denise's eyes filled, but her voice sharpened. I lost my home once. You know what that did to me. I looked at her, and I meant every word. I am sorry for what happened to you. but I am not responsible for repairing it with my parents' house. For the first time all night, Denise had nothing ready, so I kept going. I set the smart lock logs on the table. Paige's face changed when she saw her name. Paige Morrison unlocked front door at 11:42 a.m. Paige Morrison unlocked front door at 6:08 p.m. Paige Morrison unlocked front door at 2:13 p.m. Paige looked at Caleb. You said it was fine. I turned to him. That is exactly the problem. Caleb pushed his chair back. We are done here. No, I said. The house is not even the worst part. I placed the business filing on the table. Blue Ridge Home and Hearth LLC. Registered agent Caleb R. Morrison. His face lost color so quickly that it almost frightened me. You went through my things. I went through our bank account. I laid out the invoices one by one. Crawl space insulation. Bathroom plumbing. Cabinet refinishing. Roof repair. Smart home installation. None of that work happened. Frank looked at Caleb. I fixed the bathroom plumbing myself on a Sunday. For free. Caleb's mouth opened, then closed. Then I placed Priya's summary on top of everything. $28,600 left our joint account through fake invoices. Then it went into a savings account at Carolina Mountain Credit Union. Denise whispered, That is not what happened. I looked at her. The account is in your name. The silence that followed was the cleanest sound I had heard in months. Paige turned toward her mother. Mom? Denise looked at Caleb, not at me. You said this was handled. Paige's eyes widened. You said, she agreed. And there it was. The first crack. The first moment the Morrison family stopped aiming all their pressure at me and started realizing Caleb had promised each of them a different lie. Caleb finally said, I was helping my mother. Helping your mother with your money is kindness. Helping her with our money through fake invoices is fraud. You are making me sound like a criminal. I am reading what you did. That was when he stepped toward me. Not far, not enough to touch me, but enough that Frank stood. Before my father could speak, Mara Chen stepped in from the living room. She had arrived before dinner and waited there by agreement. Not to ambush anyone, but because Mara had told me that if Caleb became aggressive or tried to force a property decision in front of both families, I should not handle it alone. Her voice was calm. Mr. Morrison, Hannah has asked that all further communication about finances and residence permission go through counsel. Caleb looked at me like I had become a stranger. You brought a lawyer into our home. My home, I said. And yes, Mara handed him the packet. Separation filing draft, demand for reimbursement, notice denying occupancy to Denise Morrison and Paige Morrison, summary of the separate property position, summary of marital asset dissipation. Denise began to cry. You are tearing this family apart. No, I said. I am ending the part where your family used mine as a storage unit, a bank account, and a retirement plan. Frank's voice came rough then, the way it did when he was trying not to shake. My wife stood on her feet 19 years baking bread so our daughter could have one safe place. I crawled through attics and basements until my knees gave out. You do not get to rename that and sacrifice because you want a bigger bedroom. Linda wiped her face. We gave her a home, not a fund for another family's guilt. Caleb looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Not sorry, exposed. You planned this, he said. No, I documented what you chose. I asked him to leave that night. He argued once, then looked at Mara, at my father, at the stack of papers on the table, and went upstairs for a bag. Denise took her china box with both hands. Paige left with the overnight bag she never got to open. At the door, Caleb turned back. You will regret humiliating me. You made the announcement, I said. I corrected the record. The next weeks were not magical. Divorce was paperwork, waiting, signatures, bank freezes, attorney calls, and waking up at 3 a.m. Remembering one more thing he had lied about, but the house stayed mine. The court restricted further movement from the joint account. Blue Ridge Home and Hearth was dragged into discovery. The business credit cards stayed with Caleb. Denise returned part of the money, and the rest followed him into the division of assets. Paige lost her code, her package address, and her couch. One morning, I reset the smart lock, one admin, one code, no guest users. Then I took down Denise's lace curtains. Linda came over with the navy ones, washed and folded. Frank fixed the back door hinge even though it barely needed fixing. I think he just needed to put his hands on the house and know it still answered to us. Linda touched the kitchen counter and said it still feels like yours. I said it finally does again. The next morning I sat on the patio at 6, drinking coffee before the neighborhood woke up. No Paige at the door, No Denise on the porch. Fact. No Caleb moving quietly through the guest room he had tried to give away, just the maple tree, the morning air, and a door that opened only when I allowed it. I texted Frank, I kept it. He replied, "We bought it so you would know you were allowed to act." And that was when I understood the real victory was not the divorce, or the money, or the look on Caleb's face when the documents came out. The real victory was knowing no one could ever again walk into my life with a key I had not given them. Act. So tell me honestly, if your spouse gave their mother access to a house your parents bought for you, then hid money behind your back to make it happen, would you have forgiven them? Or would that have been the moment the marriage ended?